he would be of their own brothers. And it reminded me of John 1:11, where it says, he came to his own, but his own did not receive him. See here. He would be. All right, here we go. We already got someone watching. Interesting. That's pretty quick. All right, here we go. We're live on YouTube. Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug. Please forgive me for not looking my best tonight, but had a long day at work during preparation day, so didn't exactly get time to look more presentable for you guys tonight. So just bear with me. We're going to be doing a study tonight that I've compiled called, it's actually going to be called The Spirit of Prophecy in the Torah. We're going to be dealing with a phrase that we're very familiar, those of us that believe in Yahusha, that are already believers in Yahusha, that know that he's known as the Spirit of Prophecy, or the Ruach of prophecy in Revelations 19:10. We're familiar with that. But what's interesting, in your modern Old Testaments, you will never find that phrase or even a hint that the Spirit of prophecy is supposed to be Yahusha in our modern Old Testaments. It's just not there. It's never mentioned. It's never mentioned as even a thing. The Spirit of prophecy, really, as far as your King James, NLT, ESV Bibles go, there's only one reference in the whole Bible of the Spirit of prophecy, and it's in the New Testament. So I always found it very weird until I started looking into the Targums, like, why is there terminology being used in the New Testament that's never really used in the Old Testament? Because we know that the New Testament writers always quoted from the scriptures, which, by the way, according to Timothy, when he's talking about all scripture, New Testament's not written yet. So right. Timothy's calling Genesis to Malachi scriptures. So I find it interesting, this title, The Spirit of Prophecy, is never mentioned from Genesis to Malachi in our Masoretic text, modern Bibles. Even in the Septuagint is never mentioned. It seems like these Targums, which are like basically paraphrase, I guess you could say, liturgical expoundings of the Torah and their actual versions of the Torah that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They were actual manuscripts, legitimate manuscripts of an Aramaic version of the Torah found. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, in 1947 or what have it. It's very interesting. This exact title is used at least 8 different times in the Targums, and it's always referencing the Spirit of prophecy. We're going to look at all these scriptures here. It's basically linking the Spirit of prophecy to the Ruach let me see if I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ruach Hadash, the set apart spirit. So it's actually one and the same. So whenever you see the Spirit of prophecy here in the Targums, if you look in your King James, your NIV, the same verse, it will say the set apart spirit. So it will actually be like one and the same. So, for example, the first one we're going to go to here is Genesis chapter 41, verse 38. Now, this is from multiple Targums. It has the phrase, the Spirit of prophecy here. From the most literal word-for-word Targum, the Onkelos one, it would read as, and Pharaoh said to his servants, mind you, this is a pagan Pharaoh. Yeah, he's monotheistic, most likely, but at the same time, this is a pagan Pharaoh saying this. This kind of reminds me of how Nebuchadnezzar saw Yahusha in the furnace, and he's inspired to say that the fourth is the one that looks like the son of Alua. Now, what's interesting here is this Pharaoh is looking at Joseph, the Hebrew boy. He's saying, Pharaoh said to his servants, meaning his fellow Egyptian servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the spirit of prophecy from Yahuwah? Now, Pharaoh somehow knows who Yahuwah is. Now, mind you, this is not the Pharaoh of the Exodus. So this Pharaoh is the Pharaoh that knew Joseph, that had good relations with Joseph. So even Egyptology proves that from different dynasties. You had monotheistic pharaohs and then polytheistic pharaohs. Mm-hmm. This pharaoh seems to be like a monotheistic pharaoh, even though he's pagan. He seems to be not polytheistic. He seems to know who the Almighty actually is. So I find that interesting. And the fact that's the first time in the Targums you'll see this phrase from Revelations 19:10 being used, the spirit of prophecy, which we know to be Yahushua. So Exodus chapter 30, verse 38, which in the pseudo-Jonathan one, it's chapter 31, verse 3. For whatever reason, the chapter numberings are a little bit off when you compare the Onkelos and the pseudo-Jonathan Targums against one another for whatever reason. The Onkelos one, which again is the word for word, is basically has almost zero rabbinical commentary in it. Says here in Exodus 30, verse 38, and have filled him with the spirit of prophecy from before Yahuwah, with who? Wisdom, and with intelligence, and with knowledge, and in all work to excel. So this context is talking about the two Hebrew boys that Yahuwah basically gave them physical gifts. His Ruach gave them physical gifts to know how to do certain things, to excel in working. This is basically the construction of the tabernacle. I think we read this like a Sabbath or two ago. So this would be referring to, what was the guy's name? Bezalel, I think his name is, where Yahuwah gave him the gift to be able to work the embroidery and stuff like it lists like all the gifts Yahuwah gave the Israelites. Mm. And it talks about, we just read it like a Sabbath or two ago. Mm. It's the construction of the tabernacle. When he asked them to give offerings for the tabernacle, the purple, the red, the blue, spun scarlet and all that. Yeah. Well, in that same chapter, he's given them physical gifts to do certain things for the tabernacle. Yeah. So Exodus 35, verse 30, which is verse 31 in the pseudo-Jonathan one, says here, and has filled him with the spirit of prophecy from before Yahuwah with wisdom. I find it interesting. A lot of the times, too, when it says the spirit of prophecy, it always says with wisdom, which I find interesting because when you look in the book of Proverbs, there's a person, not just an adjective, a person, an individual known as wisdom in the book of Proverbs, which is Yahushua. So I find it interesting that these Targums link wisdom with the spirit of prophecy. I find that interesting. Whether they intended to do that or not, but, linguistically is kind of interesting. So it says with wisdom, with intelligence, and with knowledge for all handiwork. And then here's another cross-reference we have here. So far, if you're keeping track here, we went through Exodus 35, verse 30. We went to Exodus 30, verse 38, and Genesis 41, verse 38. So basically, 3 witnesses already that the spirit of prophecy is Yahushua, which I find interesting, especially if you know the history of the Targums, that they were written by most likely Judean scribes that didn't even accept Yahushua as the Messiah. So I just find this very interesting. Numbers 11, verse 25, and Yahuwah was revealed in the cloud and spake with him. So we know this event as the first ever Shavuot. According to tradition, most Jewish people, when they read Numbers chapter 11, when you got the spirit of Yahuwah resting on the 24 elders, their own tradition, they believe that was on Pentecost, on Shavuot. So their own tradition, like basically they believe that the day of Pentecost in Acts was like basically a second outpouring, referring back to Numbers 11, basically. Those of us that believe in the whole Bible, especially even if you look at, Jewish people today even look at Numbers 11 like that was an outpouring that was similar to the book of Joel. Mm. And, that most Jewish people even acknowledge that most likely it probably was on Pentecost that this happened. That the outpouring happened with putting his spirit on Masha and then telling Masha to put the same spirit that's in him to put it on the elders. You know what I'm talking about, Mom?
Mm-hmm.
Numbers 11:25. And Yahuwah was revealed in the cloud and spake with him, and he made the enlargement of the spirit that was upon him, meaning upon Masha, Moses, and imparted to the 70 men, my bad, not 24. Let me correct myself. 70 men, the elders. And it came to pass that when the spirit of prophecy rested upon them, they prophesied and ceased not. So it's very similar to what is supposed to be prophecy in the book of Joel for the end times. Numbers 11:26, but 2 men remained in the camp, the name of one Eldad, the name of the second Medad, and the spirit of prophecy. So this is the very next verse 26 of Numbers 11. And it says, and the spirit of prophecy rested upon them. And though they were in the writings, they had not come out of the camp, but they prophesied in the camp. And the only difference with the Pseudo-Jonathan Targum, I find it interesting. It says it actually has, oh no, my bad, not the Pseudo-Jonathan. The Jerusalem Targum has a more literal rendering. Rather than the spirit of prophecy, it says the Ruach Kohadash or Ruach Kuhadash, so the set apart spirit. So like I said, the set apart spirit in the Targums a lot of the times is paraphrased as the spirit of prophecy, which makes sense because we know that there's only one Ruach that we're immersed in. There's a one Ruach, one immersion. So, okay, and we know that Yahuwah is the spirit according to John 4:24. So it makes perfect sense. Numbers 11:29, but Musha, which by the way, the Aramaic version of Masha is Musha. For whatever reason, phonetically it's different in the Aramaic. But Musha said, are you jealous for my sake? I would that all the people of Yahuwah did prophesy and that Yahuwah would confer the spirit of prophecy upon them. So both the Pseudo-Jonathan Targum and the Targum of Onkelos both say in this exact verse in Numbers 11:29, the spirit of prophecy for what your Bibles would probably say the set-apart spirit. So basically, that's the major difference. It's paraphrased as the spirit of prophecy. Then if we go to Numbers 24, verse 2, okay, so a couple of chapters later on, you have this verse here. This is the story of Balaam here. Yahuwah was using Balaam to actually barak Yasharal. Even it seemed like against Balaam's own will. In a weird way, Yahuwah caused him to barak Yasharal even when he wanted to curse them. So it says, and Balaam lifted up his eyes, and behold, Yasharal dwelling by his tribes, and the spirit of prophecy rested upon him from before Yahuwah. So very interesting. Again, the reference of the spirit of prophecy resting on them from before Yahuwah. So that's both from the Targum Onkelos and the Pseudo-Jonathan Targum both say that. Now we're going to jump a couple of chapters later in Numbers 27, verse 18. Yay. All right. So Numbers chapter 27, verse 18 says, and Yahuwah said to Musha, take to you Yahusha bar Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of prophecy. Now, what's so interesting about this is that Yahusha bar Nun is basically a type of Yahusha, the Messiah. Mm-hmm. You know, so what's interesting is that technically you could say Yahusha himself was dwelling in Yahusha bar Nun. I just find that very interesting. So the spirit of prophecy was actually in Yahusha bar Nun. And isn't there a verse, Mom, in the book of Numbers where it singles out, it specifically singles out Yahusha and Caleb, and it says the rest of the camp did not have the same spirit that they had in them.
I don't know.
I'm going to look that up real quick because that's a pretty important verse. See here, so it says the spirit that was in Joshua and Caleb. All right, so let's see here. Okay, here we go. Come on. Yeah, Joshua, the book of Yahusha, chapter 14 has a couple verses about them, but there's a specific verse I'm looking for. It says, Joshua and Caleb had a different spirit. I think it's worded as. So that shows you that Yahuwah is not giving his spirit to everyone. Like the old adage in the church is that, especially growing up in the Christian churches, he gives his spirit to everyone. Everyone has the Ruach. But you'll see here in the Tanakh, it's very specific. It's very the Tanakh time period before Pentecost. Yahuwah was very picky who he was giving his spirit to. King David was one of them. He specifically chose King David for his Ruach to dwell in. But even way before that, Numbers chapter 14, verse 24 says, but my servant Caleb has a, sometimes the NLT, man, sometimes I got to ignore the NLT because they paraphrase a little too much. Different attitude. Nah, that's wrong. All right. Nah, the ESV has it correct though. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit or Ruach and has followed me fully, meaning diligently, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Now, basically, just to put it in a nutshell for those that don't know this story very well, basically you had two individuals of that whole generation that went into the land.
Right.
So really the crux of this story is Yahusha's son of Nun and Caleb were the only ones really Yahuwah was among, quote unquote. Because remember, we just read the couple of weekends ago, the story of the rebellion of Korah and all that, right?
Yeah.
Remember how they wanted to claim, Yahuwah's among all of us, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you see how well that ended up for them. Oh, Yahuwah's among all of us. We're all his people. Oh, really? Okay. You know, how many thousand dead?
Yeah, I forget. It's 20 or something.
He knows our hearts. Oh, yep.
Yeah. He
Uh-huh.
does know your heart, and that's where the problem lies.
So, and this is actually the verse I was looking for, is verse 6 of that same chapter 14 of Numbers. It says, Yahusha's son of Nun and Caleb, son of Yefuneh, who were among those who had spied out the land. So it's something about rending their garments. Never mind. But anyway, you can see here in verse 24 of that chapter, though, it does say, and Caleb had a different spirit and followed him wholeheartedly. Okay, so basically Caleb and Yahusha, son of Nun, followed Yahuwah wholeheartedly, and Yahuwah's spirit was actually among them, dwelling in them. And you see that again mentioned in Numbers 27:18 in the Targums. That same spirit of Yahuwah is known as the spirit of prophecy, and it was in Yahusha bar Nun, the son of Nun. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of this pretty short, straight to the point study. I'll probably be eventually starting putting these videos, especially studies that are specifically about the Targums, are going to start putting in a playlist on my channel, and why it's important to look into older versions of the Torah like the Targums, because they kind of give you more of an insight to the culture of the Hebrews at that point in time, and why there's certain language in the New Testament that basically pulls from these specific Aramaic versions of the Torah. They're basically Aramaic translations of a earlier Paleo Hebrew, kind of similar to how the Septuagint is a Koine Greek translation of an earlier Paleo-Hebrew Old Testament. It's kind of the same thing. And I just wanted to show you guys, I might as well read the last cross-reference we have here that points that all these cross-references from the Targums point to Yahusha being the spirit of prophecy, and kind of give, like you could say, eight witnesses to the fact that John's not making this stuff up in the Brit Hadashah in the New Testament, that John most likely probably would have known about these Targums maybe in an oral tradition form back then, as liturgical versions of the Torah that he might have heard, and maybe that's why he's using it. He feels inspired to use this type of terminology, why he calls Yahusha the spirit of prophecy here. Okay, so it says here in Revelations 19:10, and I fell before his feet to worship him, but he said to me, see not, I am your fellow servant. So this is a regular messenger, heavenly messenger. By the way, this is not Yahusha. I know there's some people that are against the oneness that want to use this as saying, well, the person that's talking to him is Yahusha. No. If you read from chapter 1 of Revelations, this angel talking to him is not the same person as the one who sent the angel. Okay, so, you can't debunk the oneness with this verse. Okay. So I'm just saying, I'm just being honest here. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but I'm just being honest with people here that are listening and tuning in. You can't use this verse to try to say that Yahusha was telling him not to worship him, because this is not Yahusha talking here.
No.
Okay, so that's the point I'm really trying to relay here. It says, so this is a regular angel talking here, saying, do not, I am your fellow servant and of your brothers who have the testimony of Yahusha. Worship Elohim, for the testimony of Yahusha is the spirit of prophecy. So the whole purpose of this study tonight was to try to really show that these authors of the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, might possibly, I don't have full proof of this, but might possibly have known of these Aramaic versions of the Torah. And some of their even own writings relay certain language from the Targums, and even some historical events that we don't have. Just one example, this is kind of off topic, but kind of is on topic. For one example, where you see in the book of Acts, and Stephen talks about that the names of the magicians of Pharaoh were Jannes and Jambres. We don't have that in our version of Exodus. But if you go to the Targums, it calls them Jannes and Jambres. So there's language and historical events that the New Testament authors actually pull from possibly older versions of the Tanakh that we don't have in our modern Bibles today. So anyway, I hope you found this study interesting and something maybe to look more into. So I thank everyone that tuned in, and that maybe you got something out of this. And so thank you for joining us. Please stay tuned. Yahuwah willing, for tomorrow, we're going to be doing our regular, Haftarah Torah portion readings as our fellowship usually does. So thank you for joining us. And to all of our brothers and sisters out there, have a great rest of your Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.
Yes. Shabbat Shalom.